They've dusted off a rather ancient statute in New York relating to election law, and they're saying that the falsifying of the business records was done by Mr. Trump in order to get himself elected. So the conspiracy is to conceal this payment to Stormy Daniels from the American public, to hoodwink the American public.
First, let's head to New York, where a prosecutor has begun his closing arguments in the Donald Trump hush money case, outlining why the 5-week trial has proven his guilt. Trump's defense team made their case earlier, attacking the credibility of the prosecutor's witnesses. The former president's lawyer gave the jurors 10 reasons why they should not convict him for business fraud and called the star witness Michael Cohen a liar. Well, Trump is accused of trying to cover up a $130,000 hush money payment to the porn star Stormy Daniels. He's pleaded not guilty to 34 counts of falsifying business records and denies any sexual encounter with her. Here he is speaking at the beginning of the hearing today.
Make no mistake about it. I'm here because of crooked Joe Biden. The worst president in the history of our country is destroying our country. This country is being destroyed rapidly, not slowly, rapidly. On the borders, on energy, on inflation, on everything you can name. Afghanistan removal, everything about what he's done. He's destroying our country. And he's also destroying it with weaponization. And this is purely his weaponization. See who's in the courtroom. You go just see who's in the courtroom. You'll see. And you'll see where they come from.
Well, the actor Robert De Niro also made an appearance. The Goodfellas star said he felt this was the moment to speak out against another possible Trump presidency.
You know my view of Donald Trump. He's a monster. He should not be allowed. Listen.
Let's back up, people. Give him a little room. Little breathing room. Let's give him a little room.
He cannot be president of the United States again. Never, ever. And people know that. And even many people know it and are afraid to say something. But people have to speak up now and say and acknowledge to themselves that he's a monster and they might be afraid, but you got to speak up. Everybody has to speak up. Of course, the vote is everything, but there's other things even before that. This is the time. This is it. It's now or never. This is the moment of truth for this country, period.
Well, Laura Trevelyan is a journalist and former BBC anchor who's been reporting from the US for the last 20 years. Good evening to you, Laura.
Good evening, Carol.
Great to have you with us. Tell us what's been happening in court today.
Well, Carol, if you can believe it, it's a little after 6 o'clock tonight here, and the jury are still in court. They're still listening to the prosecution as the prosecution sums up their closing arguments. And it may well be that the jurors will be there for another hour because the judge said they seem to be reasonably awake, and that after listening to 3 hours from the defense earlier. But it's such an interesting case, Carol, and what we've just been hearing in the last hour is essentially the prosecution arguing that Donald Trump tried to hoodwink the American public on the eve of the 2016 election by trying to silence Stormy Daniels, the porn star, by authorizing this hush money payment to her so that she wouldn't tell the American people that she'd had sex with him. So that is really the core of the prosecution case. They're saying it's impossible to know whether this could have affected the outcome of the 2016 election had the American people known that Mr. Trump had had sex with a porn star. But the prosecution is saying that the Trump campaign went into a panic after, remember that infamous Access Hollywood tape where Mr. Trump is caught on tape talking about groping women. So we have to kind of rewind 8 years and think of that fevered 2016 campaign. And the prosecution are arguing that this is why Mr. Trump authorized these payments to Stormy Daniels and that these business records were falsified. The defense, though, Carol, is saying this is complete rubbish. Mr. Trump never had sex with Stormy Daniels. He never falsified any business records. He merely paid his fixer and lawyer, Michael Cohen, the person who paid Stormy Daniels $130,000, and that this is just a fuss about nothing, according to the defense.
It's fascinating, this, isn't it? Because there's so much evidence that this money actually was paid, and Michael Cohen himself has talked about that. But the case is about whether he was trying to pay this money in order to hush up the affair, in order to affect the outcome of that election.
That's exactly right. So, under New York state law, falsifying business records is a misdemeanor unless you can prove that it's being done in support of another crime. So, this is what the prosecution have to prove. They've dusted off a rather ancient statute in New York relating to election law, and they're saying that the falsifying of the business records was done by Mr. Trump in order to get himself elected. So the conspiracy is to conceal this payment to Stormy Daniels from the American public, to hoodwink the American public, as the prosecution put it just about an hour ago. So in a way, it's quite complicated and quite technical, because as you say, these payments that Michael Cohen made to Stormy Daniels, they're at the heart of the case, and then the reimbursements that he gets from Mr. Trump. It's all about these business ledgers and what do these payments show, and the Trump lawyers are saying simply these payments are regular payments to Michael Cohen, who was the consigliere, the fixer, the lawyer for Mr. Trump. And Michael Cohen is saying that this is all about him getting paid back for paying off Stormy Daniels. Now, Michael Cohen himself, we should add, is a convicted felon, and the Trump campaign are making a lot of hay with that one, Carol.
Yeah, absolutely, as they would. And Donald Trump himself has been there in court, as he has been day after day, but he did choose not to actually give evidence himself.
And of course, this isn't uncommon in criminal trials, that the defendant doesn't usually take the witness stand unless the defense feel that it's really going to be in their favor. So no, he has been rolling his eyes a lot in court. At one point, he was heard, people thought, to be cursing when Stormy Daniels herself was giving evidence. He's under a gag order from the judge not to attack the jury, any of the witnesses. He was actually fined $10,000 for doing that. Today, he posted on his Trump social account, boring, presumably in reference to the prosecution case. But the whole thing is really going to hinge on Michael Cohen and whether the jury believe his account that he paid off Stormy Daniels at the direction of Mr. Trump, or is he, as the Trump campaign say, they called him a gloat in court today, Carol, which stands for an acronym, the greatest liar of all time. In American sporting circles, one refers to GOATs, the greatest of all time, Serena Williams, for example, the tennis player. So the Trump campaign outside the courtroom, the Trump sons also called Michael Cohen, they called him the embodiment of reasonable doubt. Because remember, it will only take one juror to say that they believe that Michael Cohen is making all of this up, and there could be a mistrial. It has to be a unanimous verdict.
And when you look at that, the fact that you've only got to have one juror saying that they actually don't think that Donald Trump is guilty on these quite narrow grounds that we've been talking about, I mean, you would have to say there's at least a reasonable chance that he'll get off.
One would think a greater than fighting chance. Remember that both the defense and the prosecution had many opportunities to object to the lineup of the jurors. They searched the social media postings of prospective jurors. Lots of people were disqualified on various grounds. So these are the 12 good men and true who are going to decide Donald Trump's fate. And the one thing we know is that none of them were dumb enough to post on social media what they thought about Donald Trump or the case. And people who've been in court, all of the legal experts say the jurors have really been paying attention. And the judge in the case felt that they were doing well enough today to listen to 7 hours of testimony. It seems likely that they'll begin their deliberations tomorrow. How long they'll be out for, we don't know. They have 34 different felony charges to consider, and they must crucially decide, were these business records falsified? And if they were falsified, was it in pursuit of a conspiracy to elect Donald Trump and keep the truth about his affair with Stormy Daniels from the American people? And the heart of that is Michael Cohen a credible witness, or is he not?
And of course, this is the first time in history that a former or current US president has ever actually faced a criminal trial. As we were saying, Donald Trump's been there in court day after day. Every day on his way in or out, he rants about the fact that this is all a political conspiracy against him. And what is extraordinary is that despite these ongoing proceedings, The presidential campaign is continuing. Obviously, Trump himself is restricted from his campaign appearances, but he seems to be doing pretty well in the polls. All the recent polls that I've seen suggest that he's actually ahead in those key swing states where the election will be decided.
Yes, recent battleground polls have him narrowly ahead amongst registered voters. If you look at likely voters, meaning people who actually say that they are more likely to vote, then it's a much, much tighter race. But yes, and remember that this is just one of 4 criminal cases that Donald Trump is facing, though it seems likely to be the only one that will go to trial before the election. There are 2 cases relating to his efforts to stay in power after he lost the 2020 election, relating to what happened at the US Capitol on January the 6th when his supporters tried to stop the certification of Joe Biden's election victory. There's that other case about he's accused of taking top secret classified documents from the White House to his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. But it seems that for various reasons, there are delays in those different cases, and this is the only one that will come to trial. The polling that we have, Carol, suggests that voters would be less likely to vote for a convicted felon. But such is the polarization in America that we just can't know. And if Donald Trump gets off, he'll say that this proves the jury too thought this was a witch hunt. If he's convicted, he will just say that it's proof of a witch hunt. So either way, he has a line to take.
Laura Trevelyan, journalist, former BBC anchor. Thanks so much for joining us from New York.